Hello, dear ones. This is Corinne from Rebel Heart Woman, and I'm back with a new conversation as part of my celebrating the stories of Childfree Women series. And where I speak to women who are either childfree by choice or by circumstance, and sometimes both, and who have a story to share. And really are opening up in a big way to guide this conversation in the way, where how I want to, talk about this. And they talk about how they've come to be on this life path and all that's kind of arising for them as they evolve. We talk about the challenges that we face, but also the fulfillment, the magic, and the meaning within a child-free life. And today I am speaking to Jessica, who is calling in from the UK. Jessica, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, pleasure. Well, Jessica and I were introduced by a common friend on Instagram, and she started to follow some of my content, and then we started to chat. And, I'm just so happy she agreed to bring this conversation here today. Yeah, because I think you, Jessica, have something truly inspiring to share around how important it is that we, meet ourselves curiously and compassionately as we evolve and, go on this journey of being child free. And Jessica is a communications consultant who loves being around family and children, but without ever having felt the strong need to have one of her own. Yeah. Recently, however, new layers have arisen for her, and conditions have changed in her life, and so she will speak to that more too. Yeah. All right, Jessica, I like to begin these conversations always just with a word or a sentence of what's alive for you right now, this morning in the UK.
Well, right now, I think the word courage is very alive for me. Just being here, and as a communications person, I'm often showing up and talking about other people. And so, yes, it's felt like a kind of bold and courageous move to show up today and be here to talk about myself and something very personal. But it's an important conversation, so I'm really glad to be here and having it with you.
Thank you. Yes, it takes courage, and I really appreciate every woman who agrees to this. Yeah. Thanks for that. Thank you. Well, okay. So, Jessica, you recently turned 42, and you have been on this journey. You have been churning through many layers. Yeah. When it comes to the question of do you want to have a child, not want to have your own child, there were periods where you felt strongly a no, and then a maybe, let's try, and then there was also a spiritual awakening, more recently that showed you a different purpose. And, just in, I think, the last few months, a new layer has arisen for you around this whole question. So please, would you tell us more about your story and then leading into, where you are at with this now? Because it keeps on changing.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what's fascinating about these conversations is that this is a question for me that has no kind of linear narrative. It's a subject that's ever evolving in my life. And I'm sure that that's the same for many women. It's just that when the subject's talked about more widely among society, I think we're placed in either the women who do and the women who don't, and it's never that clear cut from my experience. So yes, I feel my relationship with this question of whether or not to have children is something that has really evolved every time my life evolves. And I think potentially I'm someone who's had a little more change than your average person. So it is a question that has gone through many forms and manifestations for me. As you say, sort of, I've moved through periods of not wanting to have children, which I think in hindsight has been linked with not being in the right relationship. So I'm able to look back on those periods and feel quite kind of grateful that that didn't happen. Then I certainly, kind of as a backdrop to all of these periods, sort of felt a strong sense of being ill-equipped to be a mother. And that's something we can come back to later. But I think that was a sort of very deeply buried sense of it not being possible, because I had, if you speak to any number of my friends, I had a very funny list, which probably had about 100 things on it, which were all the reasons why I believed I couldn't or shouldn't become a mother. And I'm glad to say that I've torn up that list and it doesn't exist anymore. But it's interesting how, we carry all these different kind of thoughts and feelings around this very big subject, which create this incredibly complex, multi-layered mosaic. I almost see it like a mosaic of things that come from our past and our present, and also our kind of hopes and ideas for the future. So yes, it's sort of it's been quite a journey. There was also a period of time where I went through a fairly life-changing event, a traumatic event, which really was a pivotal moment for me in many different respects. But ultimately, it's sort of turned into something surprisingly positive on so many levels, because I embarked on a very kind of deep and personal healing journey, which has healed some of those deeper levels of things I was less aware of to do with, the mother and attachment, and things that can really have a very strong influence on how we feel about motherhood in our adult lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned last time that through that deep inner work that you've been doing after that traumatizing event, working on the mother wound and on the attachment, that you felt after all that you came actually to a place of feeling liberated, and starting, and like almost like in a place of where it's possible for you to make this choice of whether to have a child or not from a yet a new place, from a liberated place, not from this place of having these tangled up ideas of what motherhood is, or what the mother is meant to be, or your own relationship maybe with your own mother.
And I think you touch on something that feels so important to me there, which is around the idea of choice. And I think my profession is in publishing, and so I work with words every day, but I'm always so interested in the language that we use around these kind of very big, important conversations. So, for example, when I started connecting with you and the content and the conversations that you're having, it was a real revelation for me to hear you use the term child-free. And I know that that's not a term everyone will choose to use, and it's personal, but that felt immediately liberating to me, to hear a different phrase to childless, because that in itself implies to me that there's some kind of lack. And for me, living child-free is it doesn't make my life less, it makes my life different, because I've made a different set of choices. And so for me, the kind of important language here is distinguishing between making choices for ourselves and making decisions. And they feel like very different spaces for me personally to be in. So the healing work that I did after that life event allowed me to make choices for myself, which feel like when I'm making those choices, I'm in a space of contentment with a sense of freedom. I'm not making decisions that sort of constrict me or keep me in a certain space indefinitely. I feel that these choices allow me to, they come from being connected with my higher self, with my inner kind of guidance. And they're not driven by circumstance or logic or analysis. They're sort of more, they're more connected than that. They're sort of linked to the sense I have around my path and my purpose here, what I'm here to do. And as and when those parameters change, which inevitably they do, and sometimes day to day, I allow myself that flow and freedom to kind of adapt my choices or just my way of thinking, sometimes day to day or week to week. And so it feels like I'm always showing up with a freedom to choose. And the subject of whether or not to have a baby is something that I really appreciate, that kind of fluidity of choice around.
And would you say, that freedom that you point to, that fluidity, also has to do with, making space for what happens day by day, what arises for you day by day around that question, week by week, and to not push things away, but to actually really allow them to be, not having to act on them immediately, but allow yourself to really, to feel your way through what this new layer, or with conditions changing in your life, what that brings forth. To have that freedom.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but I have 1,000 thoughts a day, and if I acted on all of them, I'd be in a lot of trouble. So I try and make space with these bigger questions to sort of put a tiny bit of distance between myself and them, and just notice what comes up. And recently, as we've talked about before, something fairly surprising has been happening, which is, I think, to do with my age and my biology as a woman. My body is really reminding me that I'm in the last season of my fertility and my window of opportunity to conceive if I choose to. And so for me, that has been manifesting in some fairly extraordinary and powerful and ways that I'm not able to ignore, because it seems to be happening when I spend time with a friend who is pregnant, or I see a friend with a newborn baby, or even a stranger in the street with a newborn baby. I find that I'm having a very physical response to that, tears are coming, that I'm responding in a very unexpected way, one that I couldn't have predicted. And so in the last few months, it's felt really important for me to allow space for that. And I hope by having this conversation, it's helpful to other women who might also be experiencing something similar in their own way, because I certainly have never met anyone who has openly talked about what happens when you're in this final moment, however long that might be. Things like my ovulation pain has become so acute every month.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my body is saying, just in case you forgot, you're still fertile, your body can still do this, and we want you to be aware of this and remember this, because here's your window. And it's been shocking.
Yeah, because you haven't had this sort of experience before, right? In your 30s.
No,
Yeah,
I've
so
never
it's
had
really
this
new.
experience.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, my body's never spoken to me so strongly in
yeah.
this way. And I do think a lot of the work I've been doing in my healing work has really connected my mind and body in a whole new way that it was simply not connected before.
Mm.
But as I've sat with this feeling, I think, yes, there's an element of my biological clock speaking to me, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think I've really kind of sat and allowed space to look at what's the emotion? Where are the tears coming from? Are they grief at the sort of consequence of my choices that I am making for myself? Or what I think actually a large part of that is that I'm moved by the extraordinary beauty of new life, that I feel emotional as I talk about it, but just because I've chosen not to create a child, it doesn't mean that I'm not profoundly moved by this beauty of a new baby entering the world and seeing all of that new life and possibility and opportunity and honestly purity that you so rarely see in any other area of life. So yeah, I feel that actually it's a kind of something is just moved within me when I see that. And I think that that's really linked to feeling more connected, as I said, with myself, but also the wider world and nature, and this sort of renewed or brand new sense of compassion and love that extends so much further beyond myself. So I think, well, actually, it's really beautiful. I could have shut it down. I could have felt very anxious about these sort of very unusual things that were popping up day to day. But by allowing space to just notice what's happening and how I'm responding to things, I think I've been able to evolve my thinking in connection with something much deeper.
Yeah, and it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet, huh? Like there's a sweetness to it as well as a. Uh, yeah, and it is fascinating. Last time we spoke, in between you and I talking, I had a conversation with another woman that I'm recording, who's 53, and she spoke to how she has learned around, the body and the cycles of it can be quite common that the body in our early 40s or in our 40s starts to react also during, the time of our period. There's like a grieving of the body of not maybe having this thing, like not creating the baby, but at the same time, acknowledging that. And as I think what you said, the beauty of, I don't know how you phrased it again, but this, what's the emotion, what's the sadness really here to share with you, or to tell you, or to offer you?
Yeah, because
And
of course, sorry, I
go
was
on.
just going to say, of course, because of my age, what I finally managed to establish as a choice with that freedom and all the good things that I've spoken about, at some point quite soon that will have to become an active decision, and that's something I'm very aware of, that I do at some point need to reach a point of decision based on the simple facts of biology, that choice is such a privilege, and I feel really glad to have had this period where choice has been available to me, but ultimately it does become a decision.
Yeah, but I think that is always a very interesting thing, that when do you reach that point where it becomes final, right? And I'm speaking here very openly and frankly. So I think let's say if you're listening and you're child-free by choice, and you really never wanted children, yeah, and that might, and really like that will stay for you. It's just always be clear. Good, yeah. Like I don't want to. We're not here to, try to encourage. Like, yeah. Well, I can't find the word, but I think for women who are where this question is more, it's just not that clear, not so nuanced. It keeps evolving, it keeps changing. And that in between, yeah. Maybe like me, I have tried for many years to have a child, and then started to really embrace the child-free life. But still, when someone asked me in the past, so how long do you give yourself to make a final decisions on that? Well, first of all, it's not all up to me. Right?
Yeah,
Like I have tried, and it hasn't happened, yeah, for many years. But then, of course, the question around, well, we could have adopted, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, that window at some point you get older, and that also closes, but it closes a bit later, maybe, than with your own fertility. So it's and that's the thing. When does it? And we talked about that before. When will it end?
Yes.
These layers, they keep coming. Yeah.
Funny, isn't it? Because I've noticed in the press a lot. There's a lot more conversation around menopause, which of course is a whole other conversation. But a lot of women speaking about the relief that comes when the menopause finally arrives. Yeah. And I think that must connect with sort of partly with what you're saying. It's just, finally all these questions can sort of come to rest to a point, some of them at least.
But I think a lot can come to a point way before, like I've come really to embrace it, and to just co-create with life. I would be very surprised at this point if we would end up still having our own child. But that doesn't mean the layers and the inquiries around it, and the thing that there's still things I have to move through at times. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you and I were talking about this, but so much of this does have to do with conditions, doesn't it? The conditions of our life and what's going on at any given time. And by some miracle, I find myself in a situation where the conditions of my life have changed to a place of surprising kind of joy and contentment in a new relationship, which is very early days, but I would say this is the first time that I've ever found myself in a relationship where I've thought, oh, the conditions could be right should I choose them to conceive. And that's something I never expected to happen, but and it's been a surprise. And again, I'm just allowing myself to sit with this new reality and this new sort of set of circumstances which potentially offer a new set of opportunities. Yes, I sort of haven't got any further with that thought really than that, but it's just, life is continually surprising, isn't it? But I think one other thing we were going to talk about is how we can really find fulfillment in, as well, for me as a woman who actively is involved and participates with close friends and their families and their children, whether it's my niece and my nephews or my godchildren, the sort of joy and fulfillment that can be found within those other relationships.
I wanted to get to that. Like, you have expressed how you can actually experience a profound love for these children that are not your children, but you still have, a very special relationship with different children, in your life. And this brings you a lot of joy and fulfillment. And this is something you mentioned early on when we started talking on Instagram as well, and how that oftentimes is not really, how oftentimes parents can't understand that, and how that can also hurt at times. This comparison of, well, you don't really know what it means until it's your own child. You want to speak a little bit more to that love that you experience with other people's children.
I mean, it's been such a funny conversation that I have had more than once with really close friends. It's almost funny to me because I think they often, the reaction I've had to sort of expressing this great love and connection and fondness that I have for them and their families, like the family as a unit and also the children individually, it's like, God, are you crazy? That, it's funny, the parents often struggle to kind of understand why I would feel that way. So there are two sides of the conversation. It's like that sort of not slight lack of understanding of what that really means for me. But also the flip side of that has been sort of these conversations where, unfortunately, and this has happened more than once, but sort of people saying, oh, but you can't really understand the extraordinary unconditional love that you feel for your own child. And I am sure that is absolutely true. I'm not a mother, and so I can't understand how it feels to be a mother of your own child. But I suppose my position in this is that I don't need to be a mother to love those children. And that love might be different. It might look differently. It might come from a different place. But I still love those children. So for me, that feeling is as real as that feeling of unconditional love to the mother who's talking about their child. And then in a way, I think the dangerous zone we get into is where we're trying to sort of compare or contrast or differentiate between these types of love to sort of put them in separate areas and boxes and say, but mine is unconditional and mine is that of a mother. So it's sort of, you can't, I think one thing I've accepted and really spent a lot of time actively trying to change is sort of stop seeking to be understood, because I find it's a highway to nowhere. And the second you stop trying to be understood by people, sort of life becomes much easier. But for some reason, I have found those conversations almost the most painful conversations around this subject, because it somehow feels like it undermines the great capacity I have to love the children in my life. And when I'm not invited to the birthday party of my godchildren, or people assume that I wouldn't want to come to a kind of family outing or lunch or gathering because I don't have children. So why would I want to be there with a load of children, like 10-year-olds running around, doing go-karting or whatever it is? It's sort of, yeah, to me, that's the kind of sadness of it, that there's an assumption because I've made this choice for myself to be child-free, that somehow I'm not able to appreciate or enjoy or embrace that kind of joy and love that sits within family life and between parents and children. So that felt important to sort of say, because it's different, yes, but for me, it's still as important, I think.
Yeah. And you know, I think where that I've been thinking a lot, where is that coming from? You know, that assumption that you then don't want to be around children at all if you don't have your own. Like it's, I think because again, there's that narrative we only maybe hear from people talking about this who are clearly always said maybe they really don't like children. They're child free because that's not their thing, and that's perfectly fine. But I think it's a lot of the assumption is like, okay, so everyone who doesn't have children, and especially if they call themselves child free, they kind of belong in that bucket. Yeah. Which is for a lot of like women not true who are child free. They love spending time with children. They have this, they love mothering in other ways. Yeah. There's a, you know, there's a lot of nuance in all of this. So just asking is better than assuming, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
This. And not comparing love ever, which love is.
No, I think that. Yeah, I had. I think one of the most beautiful conversations I've ever had with a friend was when she asked me. It's the first time I was ever asked to be a godmother. And this great friend who I was very close to at the time, she came and she had really thought through all the reasons why she wanted to ask me to be a godmother to her firstborn child. And those reasons were she listed some of the things that she really appreciates and admires about me. So that was the first thing. And she asked that I bring those things into her child's life, whether it's my love of poetry or, I mean, any, number of things. And then she said, so there were three things. So that was the first. The second was that I would be a place that he could go to when he didn't want to speak to her or his father. And she wanted to know that he would always have somewhere with an open door where he could go if he was ever in trouble or had a difficult kind of thing to deal with in life. Amazing forethought for someone who's, not yet given birth to her first baby. And so that was the second. And the third was that it would always be a way of keeping us connected within our friendship and our relationship, and that we would have this shared thing that's really important to both of us, that this child would be the thing that would always hold our friendship together, whatever was going on for each of us. And actually, that was probably 13 years ago. Our relationship has gone through ups and downs, but we still are connected and we still are in each other's lives because we share this really important priority, which is her son. And I think that's just a great example of how, we can share, we're sort of never really meant to raise our families in nuclear units, were we? We were supposed to do it as a community and as a village, and everybody would have different roles within that community. Not every woman would have a child because they had a different role. And I think in some ways being child-free allows me more space and energy and capacity to offer those children in my life something different to what they are able to get from their parents. And that, in my mind, that feels important too.
Yes. Yeah, and being that woman within that village around you that has that space, because as we know, mothering these days, it's a lot, especially if someone works full time. And why not reaching out and
In lockdown that happened quite a lot. Friends would call me up and say, I'm just so tired, I am spent all my time with my children, I can't bear it. And I would go over and take them out for 2 hours, which was a great joy to me because it was fun and different. And she would get to take a bath or spend an hour with her husband or not, or it's sort of, where we can support each other by having these different life choices and roles that we choose to inhabit, I think.
Yeah. And and I think, I mean, I know we both hope, a lot of us Childfree Women really hope that we come back to that away from that nuclear family, back again to the village. Yeah. And it takes both sides. It takes, the child-free community, but it also takes the mothers to obviously, be willing to share the children with us. Yeah, like it goes, yeah. And I think because I'm an expat, right? Expat life, so I'm not really around my family. I have 3 godsons, lots of nephews, but I kind of, when I'm there, I'm really there. But then when I'm not there, well, which is most of the time, I'm away from it. And so I'm not living that as much. But it is something that comes to me a lot, that feeling of community. It doesn't have to be children. It can be more like teenage girls. There's definitely something in there. Like I see my role as I grow older to bring that in more in my life as well. Yeah, not just working with the women, but maybe with the teenage girls as well at some point. But who knows? And again, that's an evolution, right? As we evolve. And I wanted to speak to one more thing that I know you don't want to go too deeply into, but I still find it, also for women who are really looking for, how can I bring more fulfillment and meaning and magic into my life? You said you recently, through that spiritual awakening, you also started to get into training in a new field, and you can start to feel there also, you're very much also connected in the last few years with your feminine power, with the feminine. And there's also maybe a part of the healing wise woman that wants to start coming through you. And in what way is that a feeling of purpose in there for you?
It's a funny one because it's such a it's been such a deep and sort of winding journey for me. It's hard to digest it into something. I haven't figured out how to digest it yet into something kind of that articulate. But yes, I sort of, I had this moment of real awakening coming up to 2 years ago now. And I suppose the relevant parts of that and everything that's happened is, not only have I established this deeper connection to myself, but that has happened through connecting really with the feminine, the divine feminine, and through establishing this sort of deeper connection with nature and the world around me, somehow I've started to find my nourishment and my nurturing from, Mother Earth. And I'm going to sound like such a hippie now, which I'm laughing
No,
about.
you're not. You're not.
um, this is where 50% of people tune out. But no, it's funny because actually this has been really important to the whole kind of context of this conversation, which is by developing a connection with a mother figure on a much bigger spiritual level, Mother Earth. It has softened, dissolved, reduced my expectations of my earthly mother, which I think all of us hold our mothers to unrealistic expectations, and or in different ways, maybe not, but I certainly had. And as I connected with this other mother figure, it eased so many of the kind of tensions and difficulties I felt with my own mother. And that in turn dissolved and healed a lot of the issues I felt with my own capacity to be a mother. So the process has been really important. That awakening has been really integral. I mean, obviously, along with a bit of psychotherapy. But yes, by connecting with that kind of ancestral heritage and different types of ways of seeing the world and connecting with the world. I've found that that can fill the gaps that are left by other things that have been less, relationships that have been less successful or less fulfilling. And it's really been integral to me understanding that for me to be nurturing and mothering, I don't have to conceive a child. I can create in other ways. And that can be as important and as impactful, just in a different way. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And so, yes, that's sort of very much what I connect and tune into, which is around my kind of bigger purpose and path in life. And I know myself, I think if I was to have a child, all my focus and love and energy and attention would be poured into that one child. And that's so valid. But, since I've discovered this great capacity for love and compassion for the world beyond myself or my family unit or my community, it's just much sort of, I can feel it's growing beyond, so far beyond me, that for now I feel my attention and energy is supposed to be going outward rather than more inward towards sort of one smaller family unit.
And I think what you have just voiced right now, this is what so many women are feeling, like a lot of child-free women in my environment, friends, healers, the practitioners in all sorts and ways, but also, they're seeing that they have that connection with the feminine in a wider. It's going away from that and reaching maybe more people in this lifetime. And I think that piece that you just spoke to is a very healing and inspiring piece for someone for whom motherhood really is not happening. like
Yeah.
for whatever reasons, many different reasons, but it's not happening. To know, hey, by connecting with your own female body, by connecting with mother in general, by healing maybe your relationship with mother, by discovering your own inner mother, there, and coming, getting in touch with your creatress within, there is so much possibility.
So much.
That's needed, and that's needed. That is a medicine that is needed.
Yeah.
In
And
the
it's
world.
not a narrowing of life.
No.
It's just an immense expansion of it. And I think that's so often misunderstood, isn't it? With living child free, it's perceived as something selfish, or, oh, she hasn't had a child because she doesn't, she wants a certain lifestyle, or she wants that, I think there are so many
stereotypes.
things around why women choose not to have children, but I think rarely do people talk about the fact that it's not about narrowing your choices to serve yourself. I think for me, it's the complete opposite. It's about expanding all the possibilities.
Yeah, I resonate very strongly with that, very much so. Okay. Well, I think we are coming to up to like 45 minutes or something like that. Hey, Jessica, is there anything else you would like to share, to address to our listeners?
I think we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? I would just love to hear what people think about some of the things we've spoken about, and if they have their own shared experiences of some of these things. I think, it's so valuable, isn't it, to find this community where we can feel a bit more seen and understood. And so I suppose it would just be lovely to hear more from people who are engaging and watching.
Yeah, so please leave a comment if you feel called to, and then we can hear what this conversation evoked in you. Yeah, well, Jessica, thank you so much for allowing us to just bring it from Instagram chat into this space. And just an uncooked conversation, like it's just as we experience things right now in our life as a child-free woman at this time. And if you have been listening and you are longing for more fulfillment and meaning in your life, and also finding your unique expression of the feminine in this world, then I have a 6 months group coaching program coming up called Creating Magic and Meaning Beyond Motherhood, where we dive in many of the things that we have just spoken to here in much more depth. And that starts on the 12th of February, and you can learn all about that on rebelheartwoman.com. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's a little button here to hear any other conversations that will be featured in the next few weeks on this topic. There's other women that I'm going to bring to you with a story, an inspiring story to share. All right, until next time, goodbye.